episode 11. We're flying now. We're full on in the double digits. Yeah, it's happening. It's happening. If you haven't had a chance yet to listen to the previous episode with Ruben, it was a good one. It was a lot of fun. I recommend you jump back and check that out. If you do go listen to it, we tried to balance the sounds as much as we could, but you know, it's fun. We're learning. And sorry about the subscribe sound that I put in, like Mario coins collection. I know it gave some people a bit of a fright. That's my bad. I promise to be better with that. But yeah, I think let's kick off episode 11. I think Tev will start us off today.
Yeah, as you guys know, the first section in our podcast is something we called News from Around the World. So in light of it being World Cup time happening, last week was our special on the World Cup. We spoke about the teams, we spoke about our predictions, and really just focused on the football side of things. And we'd be remiss of us to not speak about the other side of it, which is obviously the politics, the logistical, all of those parts that make up the running of the World Cup. And obviously this is a very landmark World Cup. It's the first in an Arab country or in the Middle East. So very similar when it was in the 2010 World Cup. But this time, this is the first time that a World Cup is being held in an Arab country, and secondly, in a nation that is of Islamic faith. So that comes with a few more rules, regulations. The first of which is very notable, and it's seen a lot of comments, a lot of feedback, and a lot of backlash, and that is on the human rights grounds. So there's been an objection from many parties related to the FIFA World Cup for it being in a country that criminalizes the LGBTQ plus community and its treatment towards women. Yeah, very notable point. We obviously know that this is a very contentious issue, and it's one of the reasons that we've seen quite a few people boycotting the World Cup. I think the most notable or prominent figures to speak out about Qatar and the World Cup and how politics don't mix was the French President Macron, who believes that sports and politics shouldn't mix. So let's start with that. Let me get your opinion on, firstly, just that statement. I know it's come up a lot, not just in football, but in all other spheres of sport. What do you make of the statement, sports and politics shouldn't mix?
So you and I have spoken about this on different occasions, maybe not necessarily politics, but we've spoken about like the role of celebrities, you know, if you know anyone wants to go, episode 3 I think is the one we spoke about that, and yeah, I guess this is a similar kind of thing. It's quite a tricky situation because on the one hand, I kind of agree with what Macron is saying in that sense that it's not necessarily something that it's not necessary that sports and politics should mix all the time. But having said that, I also think that people that are any position, not just sportsmen, anyone that has the space where people will listen to them and where they hold an influence, I believe you should use, not all the time, but you can use that or should use that platform to speak about things that matter. So like in the same token where we spoke about Kyrie Irving, how he shouldn't use the platform to boost anti-Semitic documentaries like he did.
Yeah.
In the same token, I do believe that there's a space for these things to be addressed. Having said that, I don't really know, you know, to what extent this is supposed to go. Like, how far? There were some people that were saying Gareth Southgate should have pulled England out of the World Cup. Now, that just seems ridiculous to me. If I don't know, like, it's not there. It's not. All these football players have this dream to go play in the World Cup, you know, and it's not, they shouldn't be held, you know, at ransom for what's going on there. And just, you know, like with the LGBTQ plus thing, I think that there's a lot of so the whole thing is like they were saying that people won't be punished, people can express themselves as they feel fit, you know, like people can hold hands, but they also just need to respect the culture in Qatar, which to an extent, of course, that makes sense as well, but I do think what is happening at the moment is quite cool. Like, England, Harry Kane has come out and said he will wear the armband, the rainbow flag armband. Gareth Bale said the same thing. England actually came in a plane that was called Over the Rainbow, and on the tail it had the LGBTQ plus flag. And I think doing stuff like that, I think, is good. But I do think it is quite tricky in general. What are your thoughts? Like, do you think in terms of like sports and politics and mixing it, what are your opinions?
I think there's always going to be an overlap with sports and politics. Also because sport isn't an isolated silo, it's still part of a greater business ultimately. And we see that business more often than not comes first before any kind of social justice or social integrity, more often than not. I think it's very interesting that England and Wales have taken that approach. I completely understand making awareness the kind of platform that they use to educate everybody around these issues, people being marginalized, etc. It is tricky because you also need to understand that in an Islamic nation, that they have their rules and regulations, and it's, I think to an extent, it's also a bit unfair to try and impose that on them. I mean, they're essentially welcoming other nations into their country, and they've said, look, these are our laws, these are our customs, this is what you guys need to be wary of. It. I think it's different had they invited everybody in, and then once everybody was at the World Cup, and then they were kind of coming out of the laws to say, okay, you're being fined £1,000 because there's no hand holding in public, and people were completely unaware of this and didn't know what was going on. So I think it is a very tricky thing to kind of balance out and see all sides absolute. Like, there seems to be a lot more gray area in this kind of conversation. And I think the second point I'd bring in is, I think there's it's a bit unfair from the Western world trying to paint this World Cup as the worst World Cup ever. I mean, we haven't even gotten started with the actual World Cup. I know there was a lot, and notably so, things that happened in the lead up to the World Cup. The migrants' death, which we'll touch on as one of the other reasons that people wanted to boycott, along with the alcohol rules that I think they did a 360 on. So obviously they have the naming partner Budweiser, who were the only or the sole distributor of alcohol at the venues, and that's, I think, been revoked in the 11th hour. But funny enough, it's still available for premium hospitality members. Everyone that's in the general seating at the matches, you're not allowed, or alcohol is prohibited, any kind of sale to the general public. But as soon as you've elevated yourself into the hierarchy of hospitality, suddenly you're open to a few more privileges, which is, I find, very ironic. I think you need to have a stance, and if you've drawn the line at alcohol will not be sold at venues because of these reasons, then stick to that, rooted in that. You can't then be well, if you give me an extra £20,000, then I'll make some.
I was listening, and I think if you do have the time to listen to it, the BBC podcast, they do like a whole, every day they're actually doing a World Cup daily episode, and I'm finding it very interesting because they're also doing the same thing. They're touching on football and the matters like the these human rights matters at the same time. But this thing of them changing the rules for the alcohol at the 11th hour, one of the big problems that people have is that it's not necessarily the prohibiting the sale of alcohol or choosing who gets to buy and who not. But they didn't really discuss it with anyone. They just made the announcement, and now this is the new rule. And a lot of people are concerned that, like, okay, so for example, you've now said that it's okay for me as a whoever, let's say the LGBTQ plus community that is attending the World Cup, you said it's okay for them to hold hands and show affection to a certain amount. What happens if they make a 360 on those decisions as well, just like they've done with the alcohol? And I think a lot of people are like, they're not so sure whether, they're already skeptical about whether or not to go. And the fact that they're changing quite a big thing as well, to be fair, this late, I think that's also concerning people, that they can just flip their stance just like that.
Yeah. And I think, people need to be held in account for this. So there needs to be clear distinction, and it kind of has to be a breakdown of all of this in black and white, that both has been signed off by the government, by FIFA, and can be distributed to media and the public alike. So you know exactly, almost like a bullet point. Like, these are the rules and regulations. Even if it's like a 10-page document that's been made public, now everyone has the physical black and white. I know exactly the perimeters or the grounds in which I can operate should I go to Qatar for it. So there's a lot to touch on with the migrant workers. I believe it was 6,500 migrant workers that died in preparation for this World Cup. Which is an astounding amount, honestly. What are the conditions? And they touched on this briefly. I don't know if you saw the FIFA Uncovered documentary on Netflix.
It's on my list, but...
So I watched it recently, and it discusses how FIFA ordinarily was just a sporting body. So it had select few nations who played in the World Cup, and I think it was from 94 when FIFA adjusted its perception to not just be a body, but to be a profitable company. So it talks through the deals with Adidas, with Coca-Cola, with the alcohol brands like Budweiser, and how they kept adjusting their business, their mission, their values, in order to become a very profitable business. So it's really interesting to see just how they operate between running of a business versus, again, like we touched on, the ethics and the human side of things. And I'm not sure what his name is, but he was one of the heads of the Qatar bids. So his response to the migrant workers that have passed away, he firstly said that the figure has been
bloated,
amplified,
exaggerated
greatly from what it was. I think his numbers were around 35 that died directly in the construction of the stadiums, and another 35 in and around the nation. So it wasn't necessarily with the construction of stadiums. And he said that the nation cannot be held accountable for a private company's running of their business. So giving them judgment as opposed to the specific company whose responsibility it is to look after its workers. So it being a private company that got the tender or the deal or whatever it is, they are the ones that need to be held accountable firstly and foremost. Before
I think one of the arguments though against that is kind of like, you firstly, as you know, we know within these countries, all countries actually, the government definitely has a right to set labor laws, right? So that's the one thing, is that people are like, okay, yeah, but you can blame the companies, but then you have two things to answer to. One, were these companies in violation of your country's labor laws? And if so, they should be held accountable by you as a country, Qatar. Yeah. Two, if they are not, let's say you don't have clear labor laws, then as a country, you shouldn't be giving the tenders to companies that are committing what's essentially called, they're calling it indentured labor, which is essentially just a modern term for slavery, like, because they're saying that the people that died were working in horrific conditions. They were working in the heat, which, by the way, the players can't even, apparently these stadiums are so like state of the art that it's like air conditioned. So it's kind of like, these professionals can't play football for 90 minutes in the heat, but you can expect people to work in that heat. And this is now summer when they were working, obviously, as well. So I think that's the argument against that. Is like, okay, but what are Qatar's laws? What are protecting these people? And if you're saying, okay, well, why are you holding Qatar responsible? You should talk to the company. It's like, yeah, but you gave them the tender. You chose that company. So it feels, I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers, because I also read that he was saying like people were taking a whole bunch of unrelated people that maybe were working on the stadiums, but they died of like an illness or they died in a car accident, and they were taking people that they were adding those numbers, lumping it all together. And he was saying, in the context of that, I wouldn't be too shocked to learn stuff like that, but to blame the companies, I don't know, for me, that doesn't work for me, but that's just me, man.
Yeah, I think everyone needs to be held accountable for matters like this. It's people's lives that you're dealing with here. It's not like, this is a contract for sweets or alcohol. As important as that is, it doesn't amount to the cost of a life. So that is something that honestly needs to be taken with more severity, and people need to own up to things like this. I don't know how you feel about the World Cup. Has any of the news, the stories, the lead up to it deterred you from, firstly, watching the World Cup? Secondly, are you quite conflicted if you are watching the World Cup? Kind of, what's the position that you feel?
It's a very tricky thing, to be honest with you. Like, man, I love the World Cup. I love it. I think it's such a cool thing. Like, I really do. I think it's so tricky. I am conflicted. I am a little bit conflicted about watching it, to be honest with you. I think I still am going to. I'm not going to lie. I think I'm still going to watch the World Cup. But it's not an easy decision, and some people will turn around and be like, oh yeah, like the same thing of a meat argument. Like, oh, like if I don't eat the cow, who's like someone else just will. Kind of like, what difference does it make if I don't watch? I don't necessarily agree with that, but I am a bit conflicted about this one. Having said that, we spoke about in the episode with Ruben, and he was saying that it's lacking that feeling that a World Cup usually has. I don't think I'm going to watch Ecuador and Qatar play, if I'm honest with you. Like, I might skip that match. But I do feel excited now for it. I do. I'm not going to lie. I do feel excited. And it's, it's tricky. It's tricky. How about you? Do you feel conflicted, or how do you feel?
Definitely.
And maybe this can be our wrap-up question.
Yeah, definitely quite conflicted. We look for social justice, and we are advocates of social justice. I'd go that far as saying that. And like you, I've kind of centered my sporting world and interest and hobbies around football, and this is one of those distinctive tournaments that come around and you always have eyes for it. I mean, it's the one time that you see your footballing stars possibly achieve the unachievable. And there is a lot of conflict around this. I think for me, there's also, this World Cup feels like it's a bit more scrutiny against it. And there are some grounds for it. I think it's also a bit too scrutinized to some extent, because if I take the 2010 World Cup as an example, the first in Africa, I don't think there was as much scrutiny around this. And in that documentary, they actually talk about how these bids came about. So 2010, 2018, and 2022. They don't touch too much on the Brazil one in 2014. But they do say that South Africa one was bought because there's a definite hierarchy when it comes to votes of the FIFA what do I call it? The bases around the world. So obviously you have UEFA, that's Europe. You have CONCACAF, that I think is the Americans. You have CONMEBOL, something like that.
Yeah.
That's your North Americas and the Pacifics. You have CAF, etc. So in order to get the swaying vote or the deciding vote, you had people at the top giving bribes in order to swing the vote. So
Okay.
yeah, I won't give too much detail. People should just go and watch it. Very interesting.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can get a lot of insight into it. But I don't feel that even the South African World Cup had this much scrutiny, maybe because we didn't have as much media outlets as what we
Yeah.
see in this day and age. But yeah, I don't know if it's my inclination that because it's the Western world looking at the East, they just feel like there's a lot more
Yeah.
scrutiny.
It is also tricky though, like, because the climate that we live in, there's a lot more attention to this kind of thing. And funny enough, I was actually saying to Katya this morning, like, if anything, the fact that these conversations are happening to this degree is a positive thing, right? The fact that we're having these conversations again on this kind of platform or just amongst each other. But, it's the same thing with like TV shows like The Office, for example. Steve Carell came out and he's like, there's no way The Office could come out now and be as successful based on the content of what it is. So it's like you're saying with the 2010 World Cup, it's just, it's the political climate is also based on the backdrop of what's happening in the world at this moment in time, how closely we are looking at these kinds of things. But, just, you're going to watch, right?
I am going to be paying some interest to the World Cup.
Yeah, it's so difficult as a lifelong football fan not to. Yeah, it's difficult, and some people don't understand because they don't have the same kind of connection to football as us, and it's fine. Like I also don't like being in the position where I feel like I have to justify my choice to watch football. It just feels a bit. It's hard. It's tough. Yeah. No, I think it is a tough one, to be honest with you. Yeah, that's just my final thoughts on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up perfectly. That's the position I think a lot of us are in. Lots of conflict for sure. But I think even in viewing the World Cup, it won't just be the game. So everything is likely to be World Cup centered. So even the news, watching the news, there'll still be an involvement of the World Cup. So it'll be interesting to see everything that comes out of it, even beyond the football. So kind of see, like, okay, last point I'll touch on is, did you see the fans? So there was big hype about who the fans are in Qatar to welcome their teams. And when people viewed or took a closer look of the fans, that they weren't actually people from those respective nations. So the article came out that says the Qataris are hiring Pakistani residents to be or pose as fans. So they get paid about $10 a day and they get 3 meals a day to pose as fans. So if you look at the photos, it'll be Team Argentina, Team Germany, Team Spain, whatever, and it's majority a lot of Indian gents.
To what end? Like, what's the point?
I think it's to build hype, to build an anticipation. So
could
before
be,
the actual, let me call them, the official supporters from these nations come in, kind of have like a welcome committee. So aside from the actual individuals that are working for FIFA or Qatar, whatever it is, to welcome the respective countries, you have people to build excitement, kind of get the hype for the tournament up. Yeah.
Well, people also spoke about the fact that Qatar's population is smaller than like London, and they're hosting a World Cup, so it doesn't surprise me that they would need some. I know that fans are arriving. I know the Red Army, the Welsh guys, are supposed to be arriving tomorrow. But yeah, like you said, the news will be surrounding that. But yeah, we'll keep a close eye on it, I'm sure.
Oh, most definitely. So again, guys, let us know your opinions. What do you feel about the World Cup? Are you going to be watching it? If not, what are your reasons?
Yeah.
Give us some insights. Tell us how you feel. Let us know. Don't forget we're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and obviously our website.
Like, comment, subscribe. There's
Do all the things. Do the super subscribe.
yeah.
And if you're dipping out, we thank you for joining us, and we'll be moving into section 2 of our podcast.
All right, so that was quite a meaty and juicy and in-depth conversation, a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes at Qatar. And now we're going to move into section 2 of the podcast, which we call Getting Athletic. So this is quite a lot of people are talking about it. And, you know, why not just join in and have our quick little 5-10 minute discussion about it as well. It is the Cristiano Ronaldo interview that happened on Piers Morgan, Uncensored. Now, this was released 2 days ago upon recording. Well, now that we're recording, by the time this comes out, it will have been, 8 or 9 days ago. But basically the full interview has come out. But before the full interview came out, there were little snippets that got released onto social media. And there has been a lot of different opinions on everything that has been said. There's been a lot of different views on everything that has been said. And I think what you and I can do is we can work through some of the things that he said and just share our opinions on it and just kind of, you know, a view from the outside as you know, we're not Man United fans. I like Ronaldo as a player, but we can just actually share our opinions. So off the bat, what I want to ask you is, on this whole thing, this whole interview that he's done, what's the first thing that comes to mind? What's your first opinion on, let's talk about, instead of for now focusing on individual things he said, your overarching opinion on the interview?
1 is timing. 2 is choice of platform. So I think we could have done this in many different ways. I think there's definitely a reason why he did what he did, where he did it, with whom he did it. So yeah, I think it could have been done better. I understand impact-wise, this is probably the best option that is out there. You've been given the platform of a man that it is title of his show is Uncensored. He literally has the floor for you, and didn't Ronaldo make use of that? I see it as his move out. So obviously we heard about how
try and move.
I think this forces it. So a lot of the time we hear about players kind of forcing the hand of the club. So say it was a transfer that they're waiting to happen, or they've gone back on their word. Cool, I'm not going to show up for training, or I'm going to come late to training, and you can find me, whatever, it's fine, I don't care, until I've essentially forced your hand. And Man United played a lot of hardball. They said, look, no, I'm not going to sell you. You're not up for sale. I know there's tons of interest in you because of the caliber of player that you are, but you're a Manchester United player. You are signed and you're on our books until X date, and for all intents and purposes, you're part of my plans. These are the words from Ten Hag. As reassuring as that is, obviously it didn't quite translate to minutes on the pitch. We noted the storming out of Old Trafford in the Tottenham game. And yeah, in my opinion, this is his ticket out. So this is like,
how do you think
we've passed the point of no return? I'm out.
How do you think he comes across though? Like now, like just your general feeling. How did he come across to you?
It plays into the arrogance conversation. So almost like his ego is too big for the position that he's in at Man United. So if the club can't work at giving me what I want, there isn't a middle ground. Yeah, it's done. It's an absolute.
Yeah.
It's either I'm in your team and I'm playing, or I'm not in your team and I'm not playing. I'm not one of these up and coming guys that need a 5 minutes here, a 15-minute cameo. I'm the star. Give me my flowers. Let me play. I'm here to play.
Okay.
You're paying me a huge salary. I'm here to do the business. Here's the reason why you're paying me this top dollar.
Yeah.
I'm here to prove that. And what's your thoughts on it?
My thing is, so he says in the interview that he was actually quite close to joining City, which would have been interesting to see what that looked like, to be honest with you. I will say the first mistake that happened is that when he signed for Man United, it felt like Man United signed him to prevent City from getting him, as opposed to signing him because they wanted him. And that, for me, was the first problem. United needed to focus on themselves and realize that they maybe didn't need him at that time. That's my initial feeling that I got. They did it to spite City, and at the end of the day, they just spited themselves. That's the first thing that I would say just off the bat. I will say that because I watched the full interview, there were some parts that I think were quite controversial. I think, to be honest with you, I think for a large portion of it, he carried himself quite well. I believe that, I'm not talking about the very controversial things that he said, just the way that he spoke. There was a lot of times when you could see he could have very easily insulted Ten Hag or whoever it was, and he didn't. He was very pragmatic in a lot of the things that he said, which I also can respect. And what he said in the beginning when Piers Morgan, I think, comes off the best in this situation, because Piers Morgan gets this groundbreaking interview. I will say, honestly, like, I'm not the biggest fan of Piers Morgan. I found that he asked very pointed questions, very leading questions, which I think Ronaldo, to be honest, dealt with very well. He managed not to be questioned into a corner. But right in the beginning, Piers Morgan asked him, why now? Like, why are we doing this interview? And Ronaldo said, because you get to hear from everyone else. The media gets to say what they need to say. Ten Hag gets to say what he wants to say. Everyone gets to say what they want, but I don't get to say it in the way that I want to. And I wanted the opportunity to do that. And that I can respect. That, I must say, I think is admirable. Now, when we look at Ten Hag saying one thing and then in reality it being something else, like you said, like Ten Hag said, oh, he's a part of my plans. I don't really believe that. I don't think Ten Hag ever had him as part of his plans. I'm going to be honest with you. I really don't believe that. And, with him leaving the Tottenham ground, I also found it a bit weird because, and he pointed this out in his interview, and I want to get your thoughts on it, like a week or 2 weeks before they played City. And City, you guys smashed them, obviously. I mean, 6-3 is probably not even a true reflection on what that match was, but it was 6-3. And Ten Hag, they asked him, why didn't you bring Ronaldo on? And he said, no, I respect his career too much to bring him on in a game like that. And then 2 weeks later, you 3-1 down against Tottenham. They were 3-1 down, I think, or they were 3-1 up, 2-0 up, something like that. They were winning. And then he wanted to bring Ronaldo on for 3 minutes. So I'm like, you respect his career too much to bring him on against City, where whatever you're saying, but then you want to bring him on for 3 minutes against Spurs in a game that's already done and dusted. So I kind of also feel like Ten Hag does have some questions to answer, in the sense of, like, I don't think he's been completely honest about everything. I think he's been very pragmatic about a lot of things. Overall, I get what you're saying about him. It does have a little sense of, like, throwing his toys a little bit and just being... I think he carried himself well, to be honest with you. I think the timing is bad, I feel. And I wonder what effect this is going to have on the World Cup. They did say things like, I saw Bruno Fernandes had an interview, because you saw that he went to shake his hand and they're like, oh, Bruno Fernandes is so cold. Mm-hmm. They asked Bruno Fernandes about that. He's like, no, there was no, like, did you hear the sound? And they were like, no. And he's like, there was really nothing to it. Like, it wasn't like that at all. So I do think the media does take things out of context a little bit. But yeah, it is tricky. What I wanted to ask you was this. He said something about he doesn't respect Ten Hag because Ten Hag doesn't respect him, right? He very clearly said that. What do you think is his responsibility as as one of the best players in the world, his reputation, all these things considered, do you think that's something that needs to be considered when managing him? Do you think, let me ask this, do you think Ten Hag has held himself, do you think Ronaldo's all to blame for everything that's going on here? Or do you think there's a little bit more to it?
No, I think both sides have to, back their actions. So Ten Hag saying, look, you're a part of my plans, and then you're not. That doesn't fly. If, I think it was last week when you mentioned all or nothing, which gives us insight into what's happening in the back. And both in the Arsenal one and even in the Spurs one, you have managers that come up front, and I've seen it. I think it was also mentioned in the City one, where players, when the manager comes in and he knows players aren't part of his plans, be upfront and man enough about it to say, Tyler, you know what, I'm looking to have a specific type of striker. You have a lot of ability, you bring a lot of strengths in kind of your mold of striker, but I'm looking for something different. I need someone that gives me A, B, and C. And don't take this personally, but you don't quite fit what my profile is for a striker. And I think it's best if we can try and either have, so let's just get clarity and understanding out the way. If we have two options. Option A, you adjust your game to suit my style of play. So I'm going to ask you to do A, B, and C. Are you able to do that? Yes or no?
Yeah.
You say no. Cool. Then option B is, let's find an option for you to apply your trade elsewhere. If it means we need to cover the cost of your salary, we'll find kind of a negotiating ground, and we'll find solutions to this. You've seen it with Arteta kind of taking the stand against Oba. Okay, slightly different. But in the all or nothing with Spurs, Mourinho was very up and honest with Danny Rose, and I think Dele Alli as well. Tells you straight, look, you're not the kind of mold I'm looking for. And these are our options. How do you want to play this? So have a conversation, have this, open cards on the table discussion, and say, look, this is what I want. Now I'll give you an opportunity to state what your intentions are, what your desires are. Cool. Is there a middle ground? What can we work in here? So Ten Hag needs to be accountable for that. If I'm part of your plans, state it. How am I a part of your plans? Don't just say, you're a part of my team, we're going to keep you around and you're going to help the team. That's not going to help anybody.
It's very vague.
Especially for a player of Ronaldo's caliber, one, of his age, two. If you're within the last 2-3 years of your career, I think he said he wants to play another 2-3 years.
2 more years. He said he wants to retire when he's 40,
So if you know that you're essentially in the twilight phase of your career, give me the opportunity to go and play. If I know, one, I want to play regular football. Two, I'd like to be in Europe. Cool. What considerations do we have for that? And having that open line of discussion. I think, to your point, he should get some credit for getting an opportunity to voice his side of things, because I don't see it a lot with players. Players are very coy when they have interviews like post-game or whatever it is. So I do think players are at a bit of a disadvantage when it comes to saying their side of the story. I just think the timing was off and what he was looking to achieve with it. No, I do. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. But, there's also a lot more to the interview than just, and I did quite like the fact that, I did feel like Piers Morgan was doing a bit of like sucking up. I'm going to be honest with you. I really do feel like there was too many times. I mean, if you can't hear in my voice, I'm not the biggest fan. Not that I think he cares. And, must be careful because Piers Morgan will cancel us. But, I'm not the biggest fan. But I did like the fact that it wasn't all about, there was a lot about it. Even Ronaldo said like things like Man United hasn't progressed. Their technology's still at the same. He also said something really dope when he said that he hopes Arsenal wins the Premier League, if not Man United, then Arsenal. I thought that was sick. I actually need to tell Ruben because he's been giving me a hard time about this. I'm going to tell him that his hero is supporting us, though, so he should as well. But I liked also that there was more to it, that they spoke a little bit about like the tragedy that Ronaldo went through in losing one of his children. And I do think it was
to a large extent, quite well-rounded in a lot of ways. But I also wanted to ask you this. When it comes to moving forward now for Ronaldo, so we know Man United has said that they are exploring their legal options here on how to cancel his contract. Essentially, he has about, I think I worked it out, it's about £16 million still to make in the 7 months that he's going to be working there. Legally, it will cost them about £15 million to cancel his contract. So I guess my question is, do you think that there is any scenario in which Ronaldo can wear a Man United shirt again, A? And B, a lot of the pundits are saying like that Ten Hag actually showed a lot of respect for Ronaldo by making him captain. It was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I don't think that was, I strongly disagree with that. I don't think Ten Hag has been showing him much respect, to be honest. And fair play, if you don't want him in your team, that's fair enough. But, you know, there's that saying that I heard in Batman that I love, is don't wee on my head and tell me it's raining. You know, don't piss on my head and tell me that it's raining. So I kind of feel like he's not part of your plans. And I felt like it was such a weird call when he made him captain for that match. And I found it like actually meaningless. So my one question is, one, do you actually think that there has been that level of respect that the pundits are talking about? And two, is there any future here for Man United and Ronaldo?
Answering question one, we also need to remember that majority of these pundits are United boys. They're the old guards of United that played with Ronaldo, that fancy him, that look up to him, that can't stop singing his praises. And so that's one aspect of it. Two, having played for United, they're always going to defend United.
Yeah.
So they're going to give the coach credit even where it's not rightly deserved. I don't think that Ten Hag has fully backed his words. In a lot of these positions, you have to be very democratic with your word and say, oh, well, you know, he is a great player and he's a part of my plans. I think he can really bring another dimension to our team in whatever capacity that is, which we know is bogus. We just know it means, one, I'm trying to calm tensions here. I know the influence that Ronaldo is. So going back to what we said previously, Ronaldo has massive influence, both in the game, both outside the game, and that comes with a lot of responsibility on his part and of his club's part, because, like we said, as much as it is centered around football and this is a player looking to apply his trade, we also have to take into consideration that it is a business. The most profitable player, him and Messi, probably in the world. I think shirt sales sold out, which is a massive contribution to the club's fund. You can keep generating money off Ronaldo in his name, and even so in the media, to sell articles, to get engagement. If you just put the word Ronaldo in any article, it's going to get eyes on it. So the media has obviously leveraged his name, which I think he does mention. Also under the criticism that he gets from Gary Neville, Wayne Rooney, etc.
Yeah, all the guys.
So one, I don't think that there has been objective discussion from pundits, media, and
Ten Hag
god
himself
of football and Ten Hag himself. Secondly, I don't see a situation where Ronaldo wears a shirt anymore. It's all about damage limitation now and how we can both get what we want. From United's point of view, it's getting him removed from the squad to take away any of the influence that he might have with his teammates, with the youngsters, etc., and to minimize damage to the brand of Manchester United. And then from Ronaldo's side of things, looking just for options to apply his trade. I think there was talk about David Beckham coming in with a bid from Inter Miami. There was talk about him going back to Sporting, Napoli. There were a few people. But yeah, again, you need to find someone that's able to pay him his £500,000 a week salary and find a fit for him. So what's your take on those questions?
I think To be honest, I think Ten Hag has come in and he's changed some stuff at the club, which I must say I respect. I do think a lot of it has been bogus, and I think it's difficult to manage someone like having Ronaldo, having someone as influential as Ronaldo in your squad and not necessarily wanting to have him there. I do not envy being in that position. I don't think it's easy to be in that situation. It's part of the reason that I actually think it was very difficult for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because I actually don't think he necessarily wanted Ronaldo, and then he got him, and then his whole team dynamic changed. So, that's kind of how I feel about that. I think that Ten Hag has done a good job at Man United so far. The way he's dealt with Ronaldo, I think he did it as best as he could, but I do think a lot of the stuff he said has been bogus. So I don't necessarily think he has been necessarily giving him the respect that he believes he has, or that a lot of the pundits are saying that he has been giving him. Like I said, that whole captaincy thing, I actually think was a bunch of rubbish. I don't even think that was... I actually think that was more disrespectful than respectful, to be honest with you. I think it was more of a power play of like, look how I can pull the strings, actually. Like, I can paint the picture that I'm giving you respect. I'm the one in control here. Two, no, I don't foresee any future as a Man United player for Ronaldo, to be honest with you. He was very coy in that, and he's like, I don't know what's going to happen. I think he knows full well that this was his move out. He's trying to get a move out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's already something lined up for him. Because essentially what he's doing here is like, if United finds the legal ways to get out of this without paying him out, that's £15 million that they would save and he would lose essentially. And although the man has a lot of money, it's still a lot of money to just throw away. So I wouldn't be surprised if something is lined up for him. But no, I don't see a future there. I think, my final comment on this before I wrap it up for us is that I think this is a huge World Cup for him now. Because essentially, I wouldn't say he's playing for his career necessarily in the same way like someone like Reece Nelson at Arsenal is playing for his career. It's Ronaldo still, but if he has a big World Cup and he shows that he can still do it on the big stage, I think a lot of people will be much more interested in January. But in the same token, if he has a bad World Cup, you never know what's going to happen. And a lot of, I was actually listening to someone earlier and they made a very good point. I'm sure a lot of managers are like looking at this and like, I don't want to risk having him in my squad. Who would want that? What if he speaks up against me? What if, I don't want to have to deal with that. But I must give him a round of applause for actually speaking his mind. I think it is maybe I don't necessarily agree with the platform and the way it was done. A lot of people are like, he could have just gone to the higher ups and been quiet. But he clearly had a point to prove. He clearly had something he felt like he wanted to get off his chest. So, yeah, I think... for me, that's it. It's done for him at Man United, which as a outside fan, I'm kind of sad about, because it was actually a bit of a distraction that the rest of us, it's like they had to deal with their own internal things. And I think, to be honest with you, I think it's the best for United to kind of close that chapter for now. I think there was a chance for a poetic ending. However, I still firmly believe that the reasoning for signing him to take him away from City is very counterproductive. And Arteta says it every week when they ask him questions about other teams. He's like, no, we focus on ourselves. We make sure that what happens in our dressing room is correct and that what we work towards what we're working towards. Pep Guardiola does the same thing. When they ask him about other teams, he says nothing. No, we focus on our next game. And yeah, I think, there's a lot to be said there. And I look forward to seeing how he plays in the World Cup. I think it's going to be quite a good one in that sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think you're right. We must give him a bit more credit. I was actually going to ask a 30-second thing after I've said my last comment was, one, do you think that players should be allowed to speak up? Should they not be heard within the confines of their club? What is my second point? Okay, I'll just leave it at that. But I'd say, yeah, kudos to him for speaking his truth. Big credit there. Be really interesting to see what happens post World Cup. And I do think, his chapter has ended with United. We'll see where he goes. He's always going to be Ronaldo. I think he still has a few more years left in him at the top. And I think he'll still be banging in goals very goes.
Yeah.
So, second thing, also 30 seconds, very quick. Do you think he would still be considered a United legend post this interview?
Okay, so the first thing, should players have the opportunity to speak? I think it's so tricky because of what the media does. The media is actually trash at the moment. Like, it really twists and bends and everything. And I think there should be a way for players to actually express themselves, and where they should feel, like they should be able to speak about certain things. I do think so. I just don't know what that would look like. So that's what my short answer to that would be. Secondly, would he still be considered a legend? Let me put it this way. With the Glazers there, he'll never get a statue. I don't think. I still think he'll be considered a legend by a lot of people. Purely because I think it is quite sad, actually, that this is going to be the way it ends, to be honest with you, because even as an opposing fan, I have a lot of respect for him and his career. Of course, I mean, it's Ronaldo, you kind of just wish it didn't end like that for him. And like, on the other hand, it's like popping off for Messi at PSG at the moment. And yeah, I think you really have an angel and a villain coming into this World Cup, right? You have the angel in the sense of Messi and the villain in terms of Ronaldo. Not that I see it that way, but I do think to a large extent he'll still be considered a legend because of everything he has done. I still stand by that the second coming was a bit of a mistake. He doesn't think so, and that's ultimately what matters. Legend, yes, but his legacy is definitely damaged.
Okay, and I think that's where we'll wrap it up. Very interesting opinions, lots of touch points, very controversial statements said from both of us. So let us know what your opinion is. Give us your rundown on Ronaldo. Does he have a legacy at United, or what do you think his next steps are? And was he right to do what he did?
Yeah,
let us know. Just remember Instagram, TikTok, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify, YouTube, and our website. So that concludes part 2 of our podcast, and we'll be moving into the final section, part 3.
And here we go. Welcome back. Here we go for section 3 of the podcast, which we like to call What's Good in Your Hood. So, as those people that listen to this section of the podcast will know, this is a little part that Tev and I really hold close to our hearts. We really enjoy it because it's where although we share our opinions in every other section, this is a little bit more on a personal level that we find these things that we want to talk about. And the one that I think is quite apt for us to talk about as expats, and just as, I would say, people that are now entering, I don't know what the prime of your adulthood would be, but we like really getting into that point. Like, I've never felt like more of an adult than I do at the moment. I'm not going to lie. I had this revelation the other day. But we basically want to talk a little bit about an article that we came across that was centered around figuring out what you want out of life. Now, yeah, it's a big thing. It's a big question. It really is a big question. And I think it's a really important thing that people need to talk about because, I was thinking about it the other day. Sometimes we feel like we're not necessarily living up to, am I doing enough? Am I in so many different ways? Am I doing enough in my career? Am I doing enough in my marriage? Am I doing enough in my personal life? Am I giving enough back? And I was thinking to myself, to ask yourself that is actually a privilege, because if you look at some people are just trying to make enough money for a meal, and they don't have time to ask themselves, am I doing enough, right? So I also would like to begin this conversation by saying this: figuring out what you want out of life, although this might sound weird, it's actually quite a privileged conversation to have. And I do just want to recognize that we spoke a little bit about the migrant workers and stuff at the beginning of the podcast in the Qatar section. I often feel sad that, some people, when you think, what do you want out of life? They're like, I just want to eat, so I do want to caveat this conversation with that, so anyway, that's just the introduction. But now, seeing as we are some of the privileged few in this sense to have this conversation, what there basically is, this article that we found, is that people, so there's been a whole bunch of research that has been done, and that people conform their behaviors, or they change their behaviors to kind of conform with what's going on around you, and you mainly do that to gain acceptance. So basically what they're saying is that we go along doing what other people do because we want to fit in, and we want to be accepted, and we want to be liked. Do you think that's something that you could put your hand up and say, yeah, or 100% I do that?
Man,
In what sense?
All the hands. And it's firstly such a great question. I think it's a question that definitely evolves as we grow up. Kind of early on, you have a vague idea of what you want from your life, what you want to do. We always start with a career and kind of center our world around that. Oh, I want to be an astronaut, and then astronaut changes to be an accountant or a lawyer, and that then changes to be, I want to be a teacher or a sound engineer. And life, takes so many twists, turns, goes through many avenues, and you end up here and you're just like, sure. One, I never thought I'd find myself in this space, career-wise, relationship-wise, internally as a person. I didn't know I'd be here. So I definitely put my hands up, all my hands for looking to, firstly, to be liked. So by nature, I was always an introvert. And being an introvert, you have a lot of walls, you have a lot of barriers, and you have a lot of self-preservation that happens. And in that, I was always looking to be the likable person by almost being everyone's favorite. Yeah, I think that was, so you kind of adjust who you are in accordance to who you're
with,
surrounded or with. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I know that Tyler is a big rugby fan. Cool. I'm going to start watching some Springbok games. It means I have a common interest. Even if I hate rugby, it's a means to get acceptance from Tyler. It means I can potentially gain a friend from Tyler. If it means Tyler's into rap, Tyler's a big Eminem fan. Okay, cool. Maybe I don't like that, but I've taken, or I've put more responsibility and importance on what everyone else's interests are before I look at my own. And it's I think it's been such a long development. I think I'm finally at the point where I've started looking at myself first, kind of addressing what my needs, what my wants are, what my interests are before looking at everyone else. So yeah, in that sense, I've always been I don't know what the right phrase is. Well, everyone's favorite. Let's just say, let's just go along with that term.
Can I ask you this then? Since you've moved to the UK, have you found that it's made it easier for you not to try and be everyone's favorite, like almost like a clean slate kind of thing? Or has it actually become more difficult in the sense of like you actually have, like now, like if you think, like I would say we know each other pretty well at this stage, one would hope so. So maybe, like there's less of a need for you to do those things for you to feel like you need to do those things to be accepted by me. You already know you and I are very close friends, so you don't actually need to do anything other than being yourself. Yeah. So my question is being in a new space, has it made you feel like you need to do more of the everybody's favorite kind of behaviors, or B, more like, hey, actually here's an opportunity for me to just be myself? What have you found has been your thing since you've been living there?
So for me, moving over has highlighted the importance of self-reflection and introspection. It's given me a lot more time to kind of work through my layers and find out at the heart, what do I want? What are my interests? Like I said, I've used a lot of my life to portray what other people want me to look like, or if I've set a standard growing up. So say my family and my family friends, seen as the golden child. Oh, Tevin is always the one that listens to his parents. He took an interest in kind of the avenues that parents would like their child to go down. I wasn't in trouble. I didn't cause any conflict, that kind of thing. So it's always the
reliable,
the safe option. Yeah, exactly. Mr. Reliable, the safe option, which once you actually investigate or do a bit of a deeper dive, where in that, how much of that is me that is true to me, and how much of that is the kind of persona that I want people to invest in, and how much of that investment is me. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, if I've put up a certain persona, if you know Tevin as Mr. Reliable, if I were to do something that is inertly true to myself, but seems so out of character, it's going to come off almost like something's changed. Who are you? Who is this new person? Why are you acting like this? This is so out of character for you, when in the reality, or in the true sense of things, it could be just the true reflection of who I am. So moving to England, I've spent a lot of time doing deep dives because of the social kind of climate here. So because I'm a lot more isolated, I don't have as much of a social net, and I don't have the environment that isn't as socially driven as what you'd find in South Africa. I found it's worked in my advantage to be a lot more socially accepting of myself before I've even taken a look at anyone else.
Okay.
How about you?
I like that. For me, a lot has changed for me as an individual since I've moved here. So for me, it wasn't necessarily being the, what did you call it? Everybody's favorite. It wasn't necessarily about that. Maybe not in the same way. So for me, my biggest thing for the longest time was substances. So I always used to be so scared of, like, my identity got very tied to various substances that I used in my life. So it was often like, oh, if I stop doing this, will I lose this part of myself? Or will I lose these friends? Or will this happen? Or, whatever. But since I've been here, I've really relished in the opportunity of like that clean slate kind of thing. Like, even when I moved from South Africa to the first area that I moved to, which was Bangsen, I already had an opportunity to, with people that didn't know me, I had an opportunity to become the kind of person that I wanted to be in that space. And I built a persona, or I became who I was in that space. And then obviously human beings are dynamic, and I changed. And what I noticed is, as I was changing, I was also losing friends. But I kind of became more true to myself, and I understood that, like the right people are the people that will stay around. And, I started trusting myself. And then when I moved from there to Bangkok, I loved it because I was in a very stable mental space, and I really trusted myself. And I was really able to kind of just move into a new space, a new school, new people around me that didn't know me. And I had the opportunity to put forward the person that I wanted to be, and not have any ties to the past. Not like, you're not met with since I stopped drinking, it was always like, oh, but it's Tyler. Like, what do you mean you stopped drinking? Like, that's crazy, whereas when I came here, I didn't have to say that I stopped. It's that I don't. It's a whole different thing, and there's no tie to the past of what I used to do or what I used to be. And that has been really, really refreshing, for me personally. And it, kind of ties to the third section that we'll speak about. But I just quickly want to hop into the second section that they mention in this, figuring out what you want out of life. And I want to ask you if you've done this. So they speak about, the person who wrote this article speaks about, the person who wrote it is actually Ali Volpe. Hope I'm saying that correctly. But basically they speak about living on autopilot. Now, what they mean by this is that and I think this is so true, a lot of people just never actually consider what they want out of life. and social media, I think, is a big part of this, but you consume this media in the form of TV shows, social media, etc. And also you consume what's happening by your loved ones, like your parents and the people that are around you. And obviously we consume like the lives that our parents lived, and we live in a different generation. It's not the same, so our life will never be the same. But we look at all these things that are around us, and we just look at fulfilling these scripts. So you look at the life of shoulds, right? You should go to university. You should get married. You should buy a big house. You should have kids. You should aspire to climb the corporate ladder. And there's actually very little room for improvising, right? There's very little room for deviation.
Sure.
And obviously a lot of these milestones are tied to wealth, which, you know, you can say what you want, but money really does make the world go around. But basically what they're saying is that you shouldn't be afraid of straying off the path of the should, right? So, I mean, if you look at you and I, for example, to a large extent, we have followed the narrative of the shoulds. We went to school, we went to university, we got married, but then we chose a time in our lives when maybe things weren't so stable, and we both, weren't so stable. Things were very stable in a lot of senses. I know for you and for me, I was at a good school back home. You know, there was a lot of things but then we strayed from the path, right? If you want to call it that. A lot of people, when they go overseas, they do it before they go to university. Oh, you go for a year or two, you come back, and then you get back into the life of shoulds. Yeah, go find yourself. Then you come back to the life of shoulds. Then you come back, you get married, you settle down, you buy a house, etc. We've done it the other way. And what they talk about is like when you stray from this path of the should, whether you do that on purpose or on accident, that's when you considered, when I like this phrase, that you consider whether the road well traveled is the right road for you. So the road well traveled is obviously the road of shoulds. And once you stray off that path, that's when you stop and you look and you're like, okay, well, is that the road for me? And I wanted to get your opinion on living at a sense of autopilot. Do you think you did? And do you think that your big move and the place that you're at in your life right now is maybe contrasting to that autopilot, and if you've learned anything about it?
Oh, these are some hard-hitting questions, man. Very good questions at that. Yeah, definitely a big part of autopilot, I'd say, goes hand in hand with the conforming to society. So, yeah, in order to live up to what the societal narrative is about what the model person or the model student, the model son, the model, everything needs to look like, you generally don't take time to stop and think. Also because, like in this day and age, there's so much to be done in what we as the microwave generation feel needs to be instantaneous. It feels like there's so much pressure put on individuals to be something, make something of themselves, have your life in order, have a career, have aspirations, and kind of fulfill them immediately. So there's just so much social pressure that it's hard sometimes just to take a second to think. And I find myself going through a lot of autopilot, and be it consciously or subconsciously. So I don't know if you could also draw comparisons, but having a sibling, there's always, especially an older sibling, there's almost a ground to work towards, or a roadmap predetermined for you. So I've followed a lot of what my brother did. So I have an older brother, and I kind of looked to match that or work in accordance to that. So early on, obviously schooling wise, it just makes sense. So he goes to a certain school, I'll follow in his tracks. Accomplishments, I also try to match that. He's a very smart guy. He's good at sports. I try to become something like that. And in that, maybe there's a part of yourself that gets lost, because all that focus is on trying to be a Sheldon 2.0. And it's only, like you said, once you deviate from that path, or you take a pause or a break and you think, okay, this is good and well. He's an exceptional person and I love that about him. But what about that is me, and how do I kind of break down this? So autopilot in that sense is one of the parts or components to it. Secondly, once I went into the working world, so I finished my studies, and then whilst I was like a foot into the working world, I thought, this isn't quite working out about where I saw my studies leading me to. So let me go and study again. So I got into the working and studying at the same time thing. And wow, that has been autopilot for the past 3 years. So in that aspect, I was always living in a very fight or flight mode. To kind of contextualize it, I was always having to do something at one time or another. So they didn't always feel like there was time just to sit, think, what am I working towards? Why am I doing that? I kind of jumped over right in, and you're looking to see it through. So I finally got the job. I'm studying towards a certain goal. And I think as another level or another layer to that, coming from a non-white background, is always a lot of pressure to supersede what your parents have done. So because they've been fortunate enough, I'm speaking from a lot of privilege here. I got the opportunity to go to good schools. I managed to go to varsity, like you said. I got given leeway to decide what I wanted to study and what I wanted to work in, and it wasn't part of the general narrative. You have to be an accountant, a lawyer, or a doctor. I was fortunate that my parents allowed me leeway to kind of figure out what I wanted to do and pursue that. So being non-white, you have that extra level of, like you said, the mold. You have to follow this route of shoulds. And once we broke away from that and coming to, again, clean slate, new place, I've broken the general narrative of it. And it's been challenging. It's been enlightening. It's been, a massive learning curve, because I came from something that was very safe. And I generally build a lot of my life around safety, around having all my boxes ticked, the T's crossed, the I's dotted. So there's some level of security, because beyond that, the unknown is just so vast. I don't know what could happen. So there needs to be an element of safety, and moving out of that safety net into something that's completely deep in the water has been life-changing. It's been scary. I mean, I came from having a good, stable, well-paying job to now being back to a full-time student. But that's come with its own set of advantages as well. So to break the autopilot mold, I think it's only happened now in the year 2022. So it's quite a revelation. Don't know how you've
and I think
found it to be as well.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what they're saying, isn't it, in the article? Like, it's only when you stray off the path of this autopilotedness, this autopilot route, that you realize what it is or what it is or what it isn't. You know, like I personally never saw myself moving overseas. I never really thought about it. And since I have, I personally don't see myself ever going back. So that's just me. And, you know, for me, the path of the shoulds, I don't know if I kind of ever was. I mean, I was on it, but I also wasn't. You know, I mean, maybe I wasn't as much of the model individual. You know, like I've done some things that maybe wouldn't make me like necessarily a role model in some ways, but you know, but in a lot of ways I did follow that autopilot way, that like, oh, you know, you have to do this, followed by this, then you have to do that. And I think maybe I was even on that path subconsciously or subliminally. And yeah, I think it's the same as you. Since moving overseas and kind of breaking that mold, it's been really good for me personally. I don't foresee, like I said, I don't think I would ever look back on it. And this actually leads into the third point is like, and the final point is where they encourage you, when you're trying to figure out what you want out of life, you have to look internally, obviously, right? So you have to look at, to focus on the events that make your life meaningful. They say, people, unsurprisingly, feel more competent and more connected to others when they find that the motivation for doing things are intrinsic as opposed to external. So they find that, like things are more meaningful to them. Like perhaps like even for example, like making this podcast was like, we had an intrinsic thing that what we wanted to do was to create this thing, and it makes it a lot easier for us to do it. And don't get me wrong, there's times that I'm sure we both feel like this is a lot. It's a lot of hard work, input versus outcome. It's not necessarily always an easy thing, but when it comes internally or intrinsically, I often sit and I think, and I'm like, I'm actually so proud of the thing that we've got going here with its whatever, how many views it is that it gets a week and listens. That doesn't matter to me, because ultimately I look within myself and I'm like, this is something I've always wanted to do and I'm doing it, and yeah, sure, maybe the outcome isn't like exploding off the charts and whatever, but it's never been about that. It's been internally that this means something to me, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. And that also links to the final point where it's like you need to ask yourself why are you doing certain things? Why is it that you want a big house? Why is it that you want your kids to go to a certain school? Why is it that you want to climb the corporate ladder? Is it because you're looking for validation? Are you doing things because it's something that you wanted your mom and dad to do? Your mom and dad wanted you to do, sorry. Yeah. And again, I link it to the podcast, for example, like someone has said to me the other day, like, are you making money off the podcast? And I was like, no, not at all, really. It's like, oh, like the feeling I got was like, oh, what a waste of time. And I was kind of like, well, A, I'm not asking you to do it, so just calm down. But B, like, if you just stop and instead of asking me if I'm making money, if you just ask me why am I doing it, and you actually listen to the reasoning that I have, like if I say to you, like, I'm learning so many skills, like my speaking skills are getting so much better, I've been doing some of the editing on the side when Tev has been a bit busy, and that's been really cool to learn. Thank you. But that's been a cool thing to learn. Building the website, that was awesome to learn. Yeah. And it's just something that I've always wanted to do. And when I look back at this moment, however long this thing may last, I'll always look back at it fondly. And I know it's because we did this. Oh, another reason that we do it is obviously you and I get a lot of chance to spend time together and talk. And it's been really cool. Like, I feel really close to you as a friend. And I'll always look back at this fondly. And there's no way I can be like, I didn't do that for myself. And, that's will be like my final thing on this is like that. Yeah. I've looked internally and I feel super proud. And I'm just using this as an example. There's many areas in my life where an important part is asking yourself why you're doing something. And if you can answer that you're doing it for yourself, then you're definitely on the right path.
Yeah, you're striking a lot of emotional chords here, man. It's hard-hitting truths. This is why we love this section of the podcast. It's very honorable. I think it's often, like, I don't know for you, but for me, it's a very difficult thing. So more often than not, I was always the guy that put everyone else's needs before my own, as a sign or as a means of validation, as a means of ensuring that I met a certain image or a certain mold that was likable, So it was almost a self-preservation in a way, which ironically is strange because you don't take the time to figure out what it is that you want, how you plan on going about it. So that's been quite a challenging aspect to navigate for me. Yeah. To actually just have a conversation with myself. Like, what is it that you want? How are you feeling? Gosh, if I have to do a deep dive into feelings and being vulnerable and, just being very heart on arm, that's, been a revelation for me. And I think, like you said, I've also gotten the question, are you getting paid for this? How much are you making from this podcast? And as great as that is, and maybe we'll get to that point one day. It's I'm still waiting. It's honestly just the thought behind it and the feelings. If I center my conversation around the feelings and the emotional part of things in life, we do a lot of things for means sake. So means to an end. I need to get a job. I need to get money. I need to get paid. I need to do. There's a lot of tasks. We almost center our lives around it being task based, but very seldomly do we take an account of the emotions or the feelings behind those actions or those tasks. Why, Tyler, are you doing this? How do you feel about it? It's been, again, a revelation, something that my wife, Lisa, has kind of educated me on, is we can always have a conversation. I can chat to you about life in Thailand. How's work going? How is your social life going? Did you do anything fun? And these are great questions to ask, sure, but I need more underlying information. Tyler, how are you doing? How do you feel about what you're doing at work? What you're doing at work, how is it impacting on you? Once I kind of move past that first layer of the onion, I get so much insight and so much fulfillment in knowing who you are at your depth rather than what you portray. So, Tyler, why are you doing this podcast? It's an opportunity for me to share parts of myself that I didn't feel comfortable sharing previously. Now maybe the world is seeing a part of me that only my loved ones had previously been privileged to see. So a platform like the podcast, it's been amazing to have these kind of conversations, kind of get insight into where you are for your ambitions. So knowing who you are at your core, I've been privileged enough to come to know that, and now I'm just getting more and more and more and more insight into all the various dimensions to you, which I think this podcast has been a perfect tool for that. Like you said, it's given a means for expression. It's given need to fulfillment in other ways. I didn't think I would be a podcaster. I didn't think I could be a producer, an editor, a host of a show. This is not something that I tangibly thought was possible. Always a random thought, but the fact that it's been made real is just one of those reasons. So very important point. I love this article, and I think it's something that I'll be looking back on just to remind myself why. I think why. We always ask the what, the when, the how, but we don't ask the why question as often. So
and I encourage we'll put a little picture of the article. Maybe we'll put a link down in the description if anyone wants to go ahead and have a read of it. But yeah, I think it's a really, really nice, wholesome way to kind of wrap that up. Is always just remember to ask yourself why. Why are you listening to the podcast? Because it's dope. Why? You want to listen to us? No problem. I'm just making a joke. But yeah, I think it's a really nice way to close it off. And like Tev likes to say, just please remember, ask yourself why, first of all. Secondly, you know where to find us now. By now, you know it's the Spotify, it's Instagram, it's TikTok, although I'm slacking on TikTok. But Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, YouTube. Obviously, the website is what connects you to all of that. And we look forward to catching up with you guys next week. And we hope you all keep well.